Because it's very easy to get pulled down that, like, well, carbs are bad, sugar's evil and it's addictive, and all of these really unhelpful sort of like narratives. So what I like to advise women to do is look at your body as a whole being, and don't just look at it as the weight on the scale. And the whole being is this: are you sleeping well? Are you actually functioning? Are you? I mean, really, let's be honest. And if not, you need to be sorting that out. It's literally the keeping of everything. And then how's your stress response? Chances are it's really rubbish, because estrogen and cortisol are linked together. Some people's cortisol response sees them losing a ton of weight. Some people, it sees them like getting the munchies and the cravings. So but if you manage your cortisol levels, you'll be in a better place to make changes than if you weren't. For some women, their symptoms and their experience is so bad, they may want to go on menopause hormone therapy. That can sort of put back some equilibrium in their body to make them feel like they can even consider making changes. And then what I would say is then try to look at ways to improve your health. Take the focus off the weight to start with and start looking at your health.
Hey there, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. I am on a Menopause Coaches Facebook group that is just full of the kindest, most generous people who have a true burning desire to help their clients in menopause. One of them, many weeks ago, posted a question about hey, what is your client's biggest pain point? I tell you what, without fail, almost all of these women said body composition, weight gain during menopause belly, something in that vein. Now, that same group offers resources and interviews to help us, which is where I was introduced to our guest today, author Amanda Thebe. I immediately bought Amanda's book after watching the interview, and I read it, and then I just crossed my fingers. I hit send and said, oh, I hope she says yes when I invited her to the show. She is simply phenomenal and brings science-backed information with kindness and balance. We talk about menopause belly, that main pain point for so many people. We talk about mindset surrounding our bodies right now, how alcohol affects our body composition, especially in this season, and hormone therapy. I loved Amanda's book, Menopocalypse, and particularly her humor in it. So I gave her the green light. I said, look, just bring your full personality here. You will hear a bit of adult language that truly just had me in stitches. And I think you will just adore her as much as I did. Let me tell you a little bit more about Amanda. She is a fitness and women's health expert with nearly 30 years of experience in the fitness industry. She is the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Menopocalypse: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. She is the co-founder and chief wellness and branding officer at Naya Health, a complete healthcare solution for menopausal women in Canada. She is based out of Canada, just so you know. She is Canada's first menopause workplace educator. Amanda provides on-site or virtual education presentations in the workplace to improve productivity, retention, and attendance for female employees through menopause. She is a popular guest on podcasts, radio, TV, online summits, and her health and fitness tips have been featured in media outlets like Oprah, Shape, Prevention, Healthline, CBC Radio, The Doctors, so many more. You get the point. Let's bring on Amanda. Welcome, Amanda.
You make me sound fabulous, but in fairness, I did give you the words to say about myself, so...
There's that line, right? We have to say what we have done. And at the same time, it can kind of feel a little weird when people are saying
I know,
it.
but it's fine.
Right
anyway, thank you for having me today.
Well, I'm thrilled. I've really, truly been looking forward to this conversation since reading your book, menopocalypse. So I was introduced to you because I am on a menopause coaches Facebook group full of coaches like me trying to serve their clients. It's just been so great. And I heard you and I thought, I'm going to go get this book because I like to pre-read books before I make sure that it's right for me and my community. And I'm like all in. So I'm thrilled you're here.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same Facebook group because that's where I think I did the interview. There's some great people in there. And it's actually for Facebook, a nice group to be in because usually that place is a cesspool, right?
Oh, yes, we could have a full conversation about that for sure. I would love for you to bring our community, our listeners up to speed just on in terms of your personal experience and journey about all things menopause. So can you kind of give us, I mean, you go into it a lot in the book and I really encourage people to read it, but can you give us a quick recap on that?
It's like, how do you give the Coles notes of something that impacted me severely for many years, right? And I think that a good place to start is that you already said, I've been in the fitness and wellness industry for decades now. And in our training, we're told that nothing needs to be taken into consideration for women as they get older, the female body. That's essentially what we were made to believe. And we didn't really question it because that's the science as we sort of learned it. And then I started questioning that when I started going through my own experiences. I'm 52 now, and it was a whole decade ago, 10 years ago. And I just started to feel unwell after a boxing class. I'd just done a boxing class. I'd worked out too hard, like you do, but usually just bounced back. And this time I felt like a bit sick and a bit dizzy. And I just thought, oh, whatever, I've worked too hard, it will go away. But it didn't. And it didn't go away, and it actually got worse. And then I sort of spent about 2 years in this like wilderness in the medical world where I'd go to my doctor and go, I don't feel good. I keep falling over. I'm losing feeling in my one side of my body, and I keep throwing up, and I'm losing my temper, and you name it. Tick the box. I was feeling it, but I couldn't work out what it was. It didn't feel like it made any sense. And you know, when you're a personal trainer and you feel like you're fairly intuitive with your own body, because you have to be if you're going to be with other women as well. I then went to a routine gynecology appointment about 2 years into this process. And he just said, hey, is everything okay? And I was like, no, and started crying like you do when you don't feel good. And he got it straight away and he went, yep, this is perimenopause. I can help you. He actually said, you're not losing your mind, you're just losing your estrogen. And I think I said, well, what the fuck is perimenopause? Like, I just was like, and I'm 44. And I think you said I'm allowed to swear on here. I think I said, fuck off. because, and I wasn't aggressive with it. I just was like, no, I'm not having hot flashes. No, what are you talking about? I'm telling you, I can't feel my face. I'm telling you, I'm throwing up. I'm telling you that I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. And he went, this is migraines with aura. This is depression. I went, oh yeah, and I'm peeing myself, which came out of nowhere as well. And he just said, yeah, these are classic signs and I can actually help you. And so there was relief with that. I was like, oh, phew, I don't have like a serious illness, because they were looking for like brain tumors and stuff, you know, when stuff is going on like that. And so it was a sense of relief. But then I was angry. Then I was like, what? Why didn't I know about this? Why is this such a mystery? And then I started to dig a little bit deeper and try and find out information. And it's there. It's just like 8 layers deep in that onion, right? And who's got time or capacity to do that when you're in menopause? And then I was like, well, ultimately I was like, if I'm going through this and I'm someone who is fit and healthy, even though I'm feeling like this, chances are. And so that sort of started me on all of this, right? Because I was like, this is not okay. This is not fair that this is happening to all women, right? They're not all going to have the same experience, but we're all going to go through menopause. And so part of me was just like, this is a travesty. I'm not happy that we have this huge knowledge gap. And it's almost going to stay that way, because what, we're too embarrassed to talk about it? Well, no, it's not okay. And so thankfully, people like you and I are stepping out of the shadows a bit and going, enough of this nonsense. I know it's awkward. I know it's uncomfortable, but let's just talk about it. And so here we are. So 10 years on from that boxing class, still talking about menopause. In fact, my kids come in from school and I text them, I'm like, I'm doing a podcast, and they're like going, what, on menopause?
Come on, Mom. The other thing too, that as I am learning, so I'm 48, I'm almost 49, and I absolutely am seeing some of the symptoms of perimenopause. So a couple things come to mind as you share your story. One is it does seem to be a bit, I don't want to say on the early side, but maybe if you have a continuum that it was on kind of the earlier end, it seems like, at least just in comparison to like the things that I'm talking or my friends. So all of that to say, like at 42, you're not really necessarily thinking about it. Like you think that that's going to be more for like late 40s, which,
well, let's talk about
like
myths. I mean, the myth is
okay,
that menopause is for women in their 50s, 60s. And,
right.
and the average age of women going through menopause is 51 if you're a white Caucasian living in the West. It obviously changes depending on ethnicity, etc. I was 48 years old when I actually went into menopause, when I stopped having my periods. But the most problematic part of the journey for most people is perimenopause, the time leading up to menopause. That can start in our late 30s. And actually, for me personally, retrospectively, I could even see things changing then, but they weren't problematic. They just were annoying, you know, but they were life changing by the time I got to 42, like literally stopped me living. Like it was horrible time. And if you look at the numbers, that's the normal age range. And so to be in your late 30s, early 40s for 8 to 10 years in perimenopause, I just fit into that. So, but what I didn't fit into was like I didn't look unwell. I didn't look unhealthy. I mean, I'm lifting weights, I'm strong and I've got muscles, and I'm going to the doctor going, I can't carry on like this. And he's like looking at me clearly going, nah, you're fine. Get on with it type thing. Right. And so I think that's what a lot of women just can't articulate or square that circle. I sort of should be okay because I'm doing all the right things, but there's something not right here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for clarifying that. That's a really great point. It's funny you talk about the myths. One of the myths that I have as a chapter in my book is I can tell you're healthy by looking at you. And I think sometimes women who do, our doctors know that we are moving our body. Our doctors know that we're eating a varied diet and the foods that make us feel well, they'll just assume that, oh, well, you're fine. You're fine. You're healthy. You're a fitness professional. You're a runner, whatever that is. And maybe they're not giving, that's just another thing. I mean, I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Completely. And that's what women are experiencing. And like, yeah. I hate the term medical gaslighting because I think it's inappropriately used a lot. I personally think that what mainly happens in the medical community, if you're struggling and you go to the doctors for help and you can't even clarify what's going on, it's very difficult for the doctors to sort of put their finger on it. Chances are for me, he was going to give me antidepressants because I had depression, right? But I think that there's this massive knowledge gap in the medical community. We know doctors don't get trained in menopause at all, zero. We know that only 10% of OBGYNs will opt in to take this part of their fellowship course. And then it's only for a few hours. So like it's not taught to them. So how can they know what they don't know? Now things are changing and there's more and more menopause specialists out there and more conversations happening about it. So I feel like doctors the tide is turning, but yeah, like, I mean, if you're presenting at a doctor and you can't quite quantify what's wrong and he doesn't know what's going on and you sort of look okay, well then I feel like you're doomed,
Yeah. And because the other thing too is it presents us such a multitude of symptoms. It's not check this box, this box, this box. It's okay. It's like, here is the page full of boxes. And so putting that together, I think can be overwhelming and confusing. And I think also there's a lot of self-talk that can go in of like, oh, well, it's not, but we can kind of talk ourselves out of it as well because it's for old people, like you said.
Yeah. We just don't truly understand. We just don't truly understand enough about it. But so to me, one of the best things you can do. Yeah, I have a book on it, but there's websites out there now. I feel like every woman at the age of 35 should go to her doctors for an annual checkup and they get a little leaflet that goes, hey, listen, in the next 10 years, if you're lucky enough, because the alternative isn't very good, like you're going to go through perimenopause and you might present with these symptoms. And if you do, you don't need to suffer, because there are things you can do from a lifestyle perspective and from a medical perspective that can make this transition, and it is a transition, easier. And so I think that shouldn't be radical, should it?
Right. Right. No, that should be pretty easy. I mean, think about all the pamphlets that we get for all of the other things too. Yeah. You go in, congratulations, you're pregnant. Here's some information. So yeah, totally. One of the things I wanted to talk with you a little bit about today, because you talk about a lot of different things in here. And so I'm pulling this out because my community, and this is what I'm hearing over and over, is menopause belly. And so I want to just kind of focus in on this, even though your book offers so much more than that. Talk to us some about the biologic effects. And I know that this is a loaded question, but we have all of the different changing hormones and how that contributes to weight gain in the midsection. Like there are things happening inside our body that's causing this or contributing to it.
And well, I think the first thing is the idea that we have to term it a menopause belly is like, it's so insulting. And I know you believe in this. I mean, because what it does is it allows all of those snake oil predators out there to go, what's the biggest pain point for menopausal women? Yeah, they've got fat and they don't like it. And it's especially around their belly. So let's sell them some shite supplements that don't work just because we know that they desperately want to get rid of it. And so I really hate the term, but of course I do, because it's just misogynistic. It's anti-woman in so many ways. And so men get a belly too. So like, I mean, you don't have to just get it at menopause. I mean, but what we do know, there are some physiological shifts that happen, right? So here's how I approach this conversation instead. And it's like, if we know certain things are going to change through menopause, let's learn about them and let's work with those changes instead of like literally fighting our way through this, because it doesn't work for anyone. And so one of the first things we know is that estrogen is the main player in the perimenopause game, and that it is intrinsic in about 200 different systems in our body. That's a lot. Like, so we know that there's a ton of things that it's going to impact. First of all, we know that when we start to lose estrogen, our bodies change shape. It's like we're the ultimate shapeshifter. So where we would traditionally, obviously not for everyone, traditionally hold our weight in our bellies and our thighs, and that's sort of for childbearing years. Now we're no longer going to be reproductive. It starts to shift that fat distribution to our bellies. So there's going to be an element of like fat redistribution anyway, regardless of if your weight changes or not. What becomes a problem is when too much belly fat is there, because we understand that if belly fat, we have two types. We have subcutaneous and visceral. And subcutaneous, I would say, is your jiggly fat. You pick it up and you can shake it around and jiggle it. Like nobody likes it, but whatever. We all have it. And then visceral, you can't see. It's around our organs and it can be dangerous. It can lead us to health impacts. And I always think as you remember your uncle at the pub with the rock hard round belly. We've all got that uncle. That's likely that he's got too much visceral fat, right? And so controlling how much belly fat we have is definitely something we need to bear in mind, but it doesn't particularly mean that it's like having some fat there is bad for us. Like our body's really smart and it's doing these shifts on purpose. One of the things that fat does is it's metabolically active and it does produce some estrogen from the fat cells. It's a weaker form, but in lieu of our ovaries kicking out estrogen, our fat cells will do so too. But even though we understand that the laws of thermodynamics when it comes to nutrition, we understand energy balance, which means that if we eat too much and our energy is in a surplus compared to what we need from an activity standpoint and all of the other components in our body that use calories, then we're likely to put weight on. And if we are in a deficit, then we're likely to lose weight. That's sort of how that energy scale works, right? What happens in menopause is that scale, the underlying laws don't change because it's science, bitches, and like get over it type thing. But the impacts of menopause make that so much more difficult. So women will say, I'm not doing anything differently. I'm not eating any differently, and things have changed. Well, let's have a look. So first of all, we're not moving like we did in our 20s. We're just not. Our kids are older. We're not running around after them. And maybe our sleep's disrupted. Maybe we're a bit more mindless in our eating rather than being more mindful, where especially if you've got sleep disruption, which most women in perimenopause do, we could wake up in the morning with those increased cravings, right? That lack of sort of like awareness or control around food. And I'm very careful about how I talk about food, because I don't want women to feel pressured into not eating food or restricting, because eating disorders are at their peak in perimenopause and menopause too. It's the last thing we need. That's something that is probably good for your community to be aware of. And
wow.
Another sort, there's so many factors come into play. Our joints may be aching, maybe we've got depression. So there are some other factors I think women need to take into account. Potentially sore joints, maybe they've got bloating because estrogen's in our guts too. And then some other hormones are at play as well. Like, for example, estrogen impacts leptin and ghrelin. You probably read about that in the book. And that's fascinating to me, because if we know that ghrelin is our hunger that tells us it's time to eat, I always think it's easy to remember because it's like the gremlin, the growly gremlin type hormone. And it sends a neurotransmitter to our brain to say, it's time to eat, you're hungry. If that's out of whack, and then leptin, the one that's secreted from our fat cells, to our brain that says, oh, by the way, you've eaten enough, stop eating. If it's like saying stop eating and you're not because the signals are not working, it's very easy to overeat because you don't know when to start and you don't know when to stop. And that's when mindfulness eating comes into play, and it can be a really useful tool. It's difficult though, like slowing down with our eating process, really looking to decide if we're truly ready to eat and trying to look for the most nutritious choices. So when it comes to menopause belly fat, one of the things I'd like to say to women is that, one, not all women get it, so therefore it isn't an inevitable. Many do though, right? There's statistically women are going to put weight on. If it was that we weren't meant to lose the weight, if it was a symptom of menopause that we were meant to keep, women wouldn't lose weight, and women do lose weight, right? You don't get to decide where it comes off though, unfortunately, as you know. Usually it's top down, you know, like skinny face and then the saggy boobs and then the belly last of all. And so I think the conversation it's pretty toxic when I see it on social media. And I just like to say to women that if you do start changing shape, it's going to happen because menopause. If you start to put too much weight on, there are things that you can do to be really helpful, like increasing our movement, maybe being more mindful around our food, looking to like get the big rocks done, like the sleep and the stress levels, all of those things.
One of the things that I appreciate about what you shared here and then also in the book is just, it is a physiological thing. And I like the balance that you have given us, that this is normal and this does happen, and you can do some things. And I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me or clarify if you feel like it, but you can do stuff to a point, and then at some point, like, we do have that natural set point. We do have natural things that our body wants to do. And so if your body has shifted and you're doing the things, then there kind of does come to a point that it's like, okay, this is just kind of how it is.
We've been conditioned to not like our bodies, right? We've been conditioned to not get old, not get fat, stay sexually active, juggle all the balls, all of those things, right? And so it's really a hard acceptance to have, right? My body's changed shape and I'm doing the work as well. Like, I know it's needed, but yeah, like, it's why are you over dieting, and why are you pushing for that last 5 pounds if you're miserable now? Like, it's not going to change anything, right? And so I just think that it's just worth getting to the root of what your desires are really, before like striving for things that may not be attainable. I know, without true restriction. I mean, and that's how I'm talking about it, because I believe women should fuel their bodies, should feel satisfied with food, should feel enjoyment with food, should not have restrictions around food, all of those things. I think that's a better, healthier way to live than constantly living in deprivation and restriction.
I completely agree. I had this realization a long time ago. You hear this story that, not the story, but this message of like, no one's ever been on their deathbed and wish that they had spent more time at work and less time with their family. And I thought, I bet you can say the same thing for no one has ever been at the very end of their life and thinking, my life would have been a lot better if I had been 5 or 10 pounds less. Like, just the clarity of what is important comes into play at the end. So why don't we take that wisdom of our future selves and apply it now and release the shame of not looking like we think we're supposed to, or particularly in the context of this conversation, how we used to look.
Comparison is just the worst because, we're not like we were in our 20s, thank God, right? But the idea of like living on salad for 3 weeks before we can squeeze into this bikini only to just like throw it all away and eat like chips and fries and drink too much on holiday, it's just the worst thing. We need to be supporting and really like being careful with our body, kind in that respect. I went to an event recently and there was, I'm not going to name names even though I'd love to, I just don't think I want to go there, but there was somebody there who was like a menopause influencer who I actually don't respect very much, but I happened to be sat next to her at the table. I was like so horrified. So I was polite and I made small talk, and then this meal came and it was beautiful, and there was people making cocktails, and I don't even really drink, but I had one because the waiter was handsome, and then they brought the food. Of course, I'm not going to say no. And then the food came and it was so nice. And then there was dessert at the end, and there were these beautiful petit four, and the person who was sat next to me just pushed them away and said, "Oh, I can't eat that because I've already reached my limit of 25 grams of sugar a day, and it's just, I can't." And I was like, okay, so you're at an event that's like pretty special and you'll never get to do this again, and you're having hang-ups over the food that you're eating and you can't even be in the moment. And that's, to me, was a real indication of the person she was, but also how I definitely don't want to live my life. I want to be at grandma's 80th birthday and I want to eat the cake with her and I want to go on holiday and eat the pasta. And it's no way to live if you're constantly fearing food.
Oh, so true. So well said. This is actually a good transition into the next thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, which is this weight gain. So I love everything that you just said. You reported in your book that 70% of women worldwide do gain weight. And I think that that's important to say, of like, this is normal. This is normal. That's been helpful to me because I'm a size bigger. I've just started buying all new size clothes and it sure is a lot better.
It's sort of a good attitude to have, right? Like, instead of constantly wishing and hoping, you can't plan on hope, right? Like, let's just be present.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's kind of a two-part question that's a little bit conflicting, but I'm hoping that you can walk us through this. Number one, and we talked about this a little bit, but how can we adjust our mindset to accept this weight gain? And then at the same time, if we realize that, oh, we haven't been mindful, we haven't been moving, we want to make some changes, like, how can we approach that with balance and with realistic sustainability?
Yeah, and I sort of touched on it slightly because we know that during this period of a woman's life, it's very similar to when they go through puberty, that we see these rates of eating or disordered views about eating start to occur. And they're starting to do studies on this now because of exactly the example I gave you earlier of somebody like really rejecting food because it didn't suit the restrictions that they were dealing with. And so, but then on the flip side of it, if you've put weight on and you don't like it and you want to do something about it, then I'm like, go for it. Like, do whatever you feel is the best decision for you. But how can you do this without literally destroying every belief that's healthy in you? Right? Because it's very easy to get pulled down that, like, well, carbs are bad, sugar's evil and it's addictive, and all of these really unhelpful sort of like narratives. So what I like to advise women to do is like look at your body as a whole being and don't just look at it as the weight on the scale. And the whole being is this, like, are you sleeping well? Are you actually functioning? Are you? I mean, really, let's be honest. And if not, you need to be sorting that shit out. It's literally the key pin of everything. And then how's your stress response? Chances are it's really rubbish because estrogen and cortisol are linked together. Some people's cortisol response sees them losing a ton of weight. Some people, it sees them like getting the munchies and the cravings. So like, but if you manage your like cortisol levels, you'll be in a better place to make changes than if you weren't. And then maybe start looking in, and for some women, their symptoms and their experience is so bad, they may want to go on menopause hormone therapy. That can sort of put back some equilibrium in their body to make them feel like they can even like consider making changes. And then what I would say is then trying to look at ways to improve your health. Take the focus off the weight to start with and start looking at your health. We're now going to be living, and we spend most of our adult lives in menopause. If you think about perimenopause starting in our early 40s and we die at an average of 81, most of our adult life is menopausal, right? So we need to make sure that like we do the best we can to make sure our body is healthy. And so for me, it's like, are you weight training? Are you strength training? Your body literally needs it at a cellular level. We need to support our bones and our muscles, right? Our brain too, it's got so many benefits. You know, this is your jam. Are you doing enough movement, like your moderate zone 2, like walking and cardiovascular benefits? You need to be looking at doing those, right? And then when it comes to food, are you eating mainly whole foods? Are you organized enough to be able to have a fridge full of mainly whole foods that mean you don't always grab at the highly overly processed stuff? And to me, they're like just simple things that everybody should be doing before you even consider looking at weight loss, right? Because these are like things that are going to be sustainable and keep you moving forward for the next 30 years. You don't have to do anything so drastic. And so it's a really boring answer to a question that women ask all the time. But then the final part of it is, if all of those things are in place and you feel as though you've got a control on your health, but you're still not the weight you want to be in, then you need to be in a moderate calorie deficit to make that happen. You just do. And you need to be looking at focusing on your protein intake to support the strength training, etc., and your fiber intake to support your gut microbiome, and then not eating as much overly processed stuff as we probably do, and alcohol too.
Yes, all of that. And the thing is, like you say, it seems like a boring answer. And I don't think it's a boring answer. I think it is at the same time simple and complex, because you can say these things and it's a lot easier to say, well, manage your cortisol levels, than sometimes it actually is.
Not easy at all.
Right. But I think too, like, we are so conditioned to want the simple fix, the quick fix. Okay, go. And to know, like, if I do this, then this. And that's just not exactly how it's going to be. Like, our body is so complex, and we have to honor and respect that and give it time to figure out, like, what works for me may be a little bit different than what works for you. And so it's not this one size. It's not something you can put in a brochure, right? To say, like, okay, if you want to lose weight during menopause, bam, 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 bam. Here's some guidelines.
Yeah, it's all guidelines. And one of the things you sort of like touched on there as well is, like, when you shift the focus, like for me, when I've worked with clients, when you shift the focus to what women are capable of doing, like say strength training, when you get them in a routine that consistently sees them showing up, and that's the key, that's what's going to help women win, showing up, it doesn't matter how big or small, and they start to feel capable again and feel strong again, it really does focus the shift away from the scales. It just does. Like when women come to me and I want to lose 10 pounds, and I'm like, okay, and we work together, and then eventually they're trying to deadlift their body weight, and they're like, holy crap, I'm like freaking awesome. They haven't spoke about the scales in months, because it's just a different way of processing this.
Yes, it's so empowering. Absolutely. Absolutely. You ended a second ago, you ended talking about alcohol. Okay, I want to dig into that, because that is something that we are in a culture that accepts, and dare I say celebrates, an end of day cocktail, wind down with wine. I mean, however you want to say it, like, this is a thing. And if that's what you choose to do, that's fine. However, I think it's important that we understand what is going on and what that alcohol is doing. And if you are concerned about menopause weight gain or body composition in general, you don't have to be in menopause for this to be part of it. But talk to us some about how alcohol impacts our body comp, especially in this season of our life.
For sure. And let's start by saying we're delivering this message with love and without judgment, for sure.
Yes.
But literally, I heard my friend Beth Contrast say this the other day. When you're drinking alcohol, especially in perimenopause, you're literally pouring fuel onto the fire. It's one of the worst things you can do for your body at this time of your life. And I'm talking about non-moderate drinking of alcohol, because what's happened is you and I have both come on our 30s, 40s, and I don't know if you're a mother, but I am. And it was glamorized, mummy wine time, like type thing. And we've normalized using alcohol as a coping mechanism. That's what we've done as a society. What happens through perimenopause is, for sure, our tolerance to alcohol changes, and it can trigger a whole crap ton of symptoms, for sure. And also it can make some of the symptoms we have worse: migraines, depression, anxiety, you name it. Sleep's one of the big things.
Oh my gosh.
Alcohol is a type 1 carcinogen, right? It's one of those things, if taken in excess, is linked to almost every cancer that is out there, plus other conditions. And our body just wants to get rid of that as soon as it possibly can. And so it prioritizes metabolism of alcohol out of our system as quickly as it can. If you're drinking at 10 o'clock at night, at 3 minutes past 3 every morning that you have a drink, you're going to wake up wide awake because your body's like literally processing the alcohol out of it. It's terrible, terrible for sleep. And so what I would say to women is that, like, if you want to support your body through this, look at the things that are stressors. Look at the things that are stressors, because stress makes the symptoms worse. Without doubt. That can be external people. That can be your work environment. What can you do to improve that? It can be the burden that we carry as midlife women with our kids leaving home and our parents getting older. Like, where can we find this balance to care for ourselves? If we're doing all of that and then we're taking alcohol on top of that, which is another stressor, then we're sort of like undoing a lot of the other stuff that was more positive for our body. And it seems that the sensitivity, like I said, through perimenopause especially, is just so much worse. I know I like a good gin and tonic now and again. That's my drink that I go to. And now and again, I'll have one, maybe one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks. It's really not very much now, because I just understand how horrible the alcohol is for the body. And what I wanted to sort of talk to you about with alcohol is like the new guidelines. And now I don't know if these new guidelines are in Canada. They've come over into Europe, and whether they won't be followed in Europe and in Australia. And our previous guidelines were, I think, 10 units of alcohol for women a week, 15 for men, and it's been reduced to 2 units a week, like dramatically.
And define a unit.
A unit is a glass of wine, a bottle of beer, 1 shot of spirit type thing, or liquor. Yeah. So that's your basic unit. And because what the data is showing is that 2 a week is sort of a safe zone. But if you do between 3 and 6 units a week, you increase your overall risk for all cancers. When you're at 7+ a week, every unit that you take increases your risk of heart disease and stroke, which are the number 1 killers of women, actually. This is really morbid conversation. I'm so sorry. But
it's so good to have, though, because we're not having these conversations as it relates to our...
Alcohol's a poison, right? So you make the choice when you drink, hopefully. If you aren't able to make a choice, then please get help. For those of us that are in the mindset of we can drink in moderation, understanding what moderation is really helpful. I've completely reduced my alcohol intake based on current findings, based on how it makes my body feel, and it's going to look different for everyone. And moderation for one woman might be drinking only half a bottle of wine instead of a bottle of wine. But looking at what the current guidelines are, that's still putting her at a higher risk for diseases that we just don't want to put our body in harm's way for. And so I think we need to stop glamorizing alcohol is okay as a coping mechanism. I think it's okay to indulge like everything else. But when people are telling you to not eat like sugar and not eat fruit, because that's the thing, not eat carbs because they're poisoning your body, I'm like, yeah, but you're drinking and that is actually a poison. And so how do we like make changes? Well, to me, again, it depends where you are in this, but I really truly just try and like cut back, have other ways of coping. Like, so what I do now, and this is really silly, is I went out and bought really expensive glasses, like really nice fancy cocktail. I went to an antique place, got the old fashioned like champagne glasses, and I love all the sparkling waters that are out now, the really yummy flavors, or I buy kombucha because I like the ginger one that's there, and I sort of put a bit of lemon in it and some ice, and I drink that like when I'm at home, and it's like a mocktail, but it makes me feel like I'm not just drinking water again. And so I do believe that we've moved and we've had a shift so that when you go out, people don't say to you anymore, what, you're not drinking? You're not drinking anymore? I think it's actually okay to just go out and just say, yeah, I'll have a sparkling water or a Diet Coke or whatever it is you want, right? But honestly, I think that if women could pay attention to that, a lot of the other stuff falls into place.
Yes, that is really good. And I will say too, for those who are listening, who are like starting to peek up and like, oh, interesting. We had a great conversation with Lori Massicott back in season 15. I don't remember what episode it is. I'll put it in the show notes, but we talked all about being alcohol-free, sober living. And she's a wonderful resource if you are wanting to transition to an alcohol-free lifestyle or just have someone in your corner. So just as a side note,
I also think as well that unless you have an addiction problem, and I don't even want to touch on that because it's not my area at all of expertise, there's nothing wrong with moderation at all, right? And so finding a balance. Like, so for example, I just recently went to Spain on holiday with my family, and I can go for ages not drinking at home. And I was in Spain and I was like, I'm going to have a sangria because like I'm in Spain, right?
How can you not?
How can you not? Because it's going back to that conversation about like being present and being in the moment. And I think that we have to look at everything we do as a whole and not just these isolated incidences.
Such a good point. One of the things that you talked about in your book is your experience on hormone therapy. There's a lot of different opinions on that. We've had some varying opinions and guidance here. And I would love for you to share your personal experience with hormone therapy and also just as a side note, why you call it HT rather than HRT.
Yeah. So it's what's really interesting about when I wrote the book is like, I need this to be an evidence-based book. This isn't a book about my experience. Of course, that's in there, but this is more like a playbook, right? I want women to know what they can do. And so when I talked about hormone therapy in my book, I talked to menopause specialists, but I also used the consensus statement from the North American Menopause Society because that's there for a reason. The menopause societies look at every single piece of data that exists and pull together a statement based on what we know. And so it's the best guide we've got. And so there shouldn't be a lot of disagreement over this because it's a medication. I don't care if people say it's natural or not. It's not. It's synthesized in a lab. It's a medication and it needs to be treated with the respect it deserves and it needs to be administered by people that know what they're doing, right? And it's not a panacea. It's not a catch-all, but it can be transformative for some women, right? So I think it's really important that if you're a woman in menopause and you're struggling with symptoms and you know that they're menopause symptoms, because sometimes that's the other thing, and you know that they're menopause symptoms, you should be able to have a valid conversation with your doctor about if it's an option for you or not. So hormone therapy is actually called menopause hormone therapy, MHT, or just HT. Hormone replacement therapy actually isn't used in the US as a term. It's used in the UK for some reason still. And one of the reasons is because you're not replacing hormones to a level they previously were. You're on a very, very low level of hormones that sort of add that equilibrium back. Hormone replacement therapy is for those women that go into early menopause under the age of 40. It's premature ovarian insufficiency or, just premature menopause for surgical reasons as well. And they're on a really much higher level of hormones until they reach the natural age of menopause at around 51. So that's just the distinction from the Menopause Societies, not from me. So we know that. I was very keen to go on hormone therapy because my life was hell with menopause. It just literally was the menopocalypse. And I was not functioning. I was depressed to the point where I didn't know if I wanted to get up every day. I wasn't suicidal, but I think it was pretty close, right? And so I tried over a period of 5 years different formulations of hormone therapy. And every time I went on, I felt good for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then I didn't just feel worse. I hit rock bottom to the point where I was worse than when I went to the doctor, almost suicidal once with it. And I went to the hospital about that. And it's only now that I'm in post-menopause 4 years and I am fine. I don't need any medication of any type because everything calms down, by the way, women, which was really nice to know eventually for most, that I realized I had a hormone sensitivity and that the hormones actually were making things worse for me. And so I had terrible pregnancies, really terrible pregnancies, but my births were super simple and the babies popped out and I felt back to normal again. And so it sort of mirrored my experience of pregnancy, and I could never go on a birth control pill and so it made sense that hormone therapy didn't work for me. And I think what's really important for women to know is that hormone therapy is not indicated for everyone. Menopause hormone therapy is indicated for management of symptoms, and it can be super helpful, but not everyone can go on it, should go on it, or even want to, right? If you're a breast cancer survivor, chances are you'll never go on it, but there are good non-hormonal options for women. And so I just think that it has to be part of the conversation. It's super, super important. But we have to stop talking about it as being a magic pill and that it's something that all women should go on. And that's unfortunately what happens in these very binary conversations. I'm here for the nuance in the middle, which is what we should do, because we need to talk to all women, not just the women that are doing well on hormone therapy.
Mm-hmm. That's great guidance too. And I love the very quick little nugget of hope that you gave us that it does get better. It does get better. Thank you for that.
And statistically, we see that most women, if they're on hormone therapy, actually end up coming off it, even though they say they might be on for life. There is a period of between 3 and 5 years post-menopause that a lot of women see most of their symptoms disappear. And so for me, my worst symptoms were migraine and depression. And for the most part, mine have gone. And what's really interesting is we know the brain changes structure and shape. I'm part of Dr. Lisa Mosconi's research study in New York. And when they look at menopause brains, they see that it changes and adapts and shrinks because they know we're not going to be reproductive anymore. And then after postmenopause, it starts to rebound and rebuild because it uses different parts of the brain to have adaptations. And so I definitely felt a complete shift in the 2-year postmenopause. It's been amazing. I still struggle with some depressive episodes and I still struggle with some migraines. They're a lot less than they were, and I never had them before perimenopause. And I think it's okay to be honest about it. I'm almost back. But I feel everything else feels better than it did. And I've got coping mechanisms in place for the things that still cause me issues, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and thank you for that honesty too, because you are what I would consider to be a true expert on menopause. And so thank you for saying I can still have these issues now. So again, it kind of goes back to the theme of this conversation of it's not a perfect formula. Like we still have to give ourselves the space to adjust and to figure it out. And I don't know, all of that.
It's so true. And especially me with the depression, I hid that for a long time because of shame and embarrassment, which is terrible. And my kids called me out on it. They were like, how can you be an advocate? I don't consider myself an expert because I never went to medical school or anything, but I do consider myself an educator and advocate. And they said, how can you advocate for other women when you're not being completely truthful? And I was like, in the 4 years since menopause, I've had 2 depressive episodes that have floored me, and I've had to dig deep. And my kids have been the ones that have been, get honest with yourself, ma'am, let's do the work. And honestly, I think that we have to be truthful, because how are we going to help each other if we just pretend everything's rosy? It's that whole toxic positivity drives me crazy.
Completely agree. Yes, I completely agree. I wish I could hold on to you another hour, but we've been here for a long
I know,
time.
I'm sorry, I
And
talk a lot.
no, it's great. It's so good. I can't wait to get this out. But I was wondering if we could just do a little bit of a rapid fire because there's so many other details in this book. You do not just talk about menopause belly in here. It is a full like research, like I love that you say, I mean, it is research based. And by the way, my community knows that I'm a huge advocate of strength training, clearly, as a personal trainer. These workouts in here, because you have really great workouts. And I mean, I did one today because I just thought, well, what a great day to do this. And I always like it. Now, I don't know if you get this way, Amanda, but I love it now when people tell me what to do because I'm like, I come up with so much programming that if it is such a
I have
gift.
a coach. I have a coach. Yes, of course I do.
I probably need one. It is such a gift to open up something and just do it. And so you have, gosh, however, 12.
It's a 12-week program. And the idea is that you can adjust it based on where you are, what you're feeling like, and you can pull back or push into it if you can. But the reason I sort of chose to do them in circuits rather than our traditional progressive overload with our supersets, etc., is because I wanted women to be able to go through it and go, I've done one round, I'm done. And it's still a win. It counts.
That's so funny. I did the same thing with my strength. It was a 30-minute strength workout. And I was speaking with someone. She said, sometimes I'm just really tired after one. I was like, then you can stop. Like, that's okay. You don't have to do all 3 rounds of it. And I love, that's interesting to hear you say. For me, having the circuit of it is a little more exciting. And that's kind of what I have needed in my own personal workouts right now. So I really appreciate it, but it doesn't take long. Like I take a long time to warm up because that's what my body needs. But I mean, I went through 4 rounds in, I think it was like 32 minutes.
I'm all about like efficiency. I love it. Who's got time? Who's got time for a 2-hour gym workout?
No. And then when you talk about the cortisol levels, well, that's going to be increasing. That puts a lot of stress on our body. And then we need to have extra sleep and rest. And if we're not getting that, like it just compounds on itself when we are doing that to ourselves at this stage.
It's really important to prioritize rest for sure. I mean, I think we need to nix the idea that cortisol is bad for us, because I'm not talking about in exercise, because there's this crazy idea that the acute cortisol response we get from exercise is bad for us. What's bad for us is living with chronic stress all of the time. Actually, exercise is going to help that response improve. And so, but what can come back to bite a lot of menopausal women is they then don't prioritize rest. And so they're exhausted from a workout and they'll go and do another one and another one. And I'm like, you can actually rest and that's okay. Yeah.
Exactly. And thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. Now cortisol, it's Pete McCall. I don't know if you know him, but he's an educator and he calls it a frenemy. Like there are good
exactly
things about it. It's a friend and an enemy. And it kind of depends on how you balance that, how you manage it, what you do with your workout. So yeah, cortisol is not all bad for sure. So, okay,
5 questions. I've got you.
5. Well, 1 question, and I'm going to ask for 3 surprising effects of menopause that you were not ready for.
It's given me depth as a person. I feel like I've really grown. I say things I never thought I'd ever say. I think I feel like a sage old witch in a tent when I talk. Don't know why.
It's an empowering feeling though.
Yeah. I think it's given me my adventure back. Okay. I feel adventurous again. And it's also helped me set amazing boundaries.
I love that. And I love that kind of just caps the conversation of this is so much more than just one thing and taking into consideration our entire being and humanity of everything and respecting all of the different areas of us. So I love that. So I have a couple questions that I ask all my guests that I want to get through. One of them is I love learning about people's tattoos because I have found that when someone has a tattoo, they often have a meaning behind it. So I was wondering if you have one, if you would be willing to share what it is and the meaning behind it. And if you don't have one, but you had to get one, what would it be and where would it go?
Well, first of all, do you have one?
I don't, but I love learning about them.
You want to learn. So I have 2.
Okay.
And I don't know, do you show them? So I have one and it's on the top of my hip.
Okay.
And I was in New Zealand. I'm a backpacker. I've always traveled around the world. Traveling's my thing. And so I backpacked for 6 months on my own, and I ended up in New Zealand, and I had a scar on my hip and I wanted to cover it over. So I got a traditional Maori, they're not indigenous, they're the Polynesian people who came over to New Zealand. I got a traditional Maori tattoo. And in the middle of getting the tattoo done, I said to the guy, and I'm lying there with my ass in the air, like my pants down, and he's like, I'm saying, it's so nice. I love the way this looks. Where did you learn to get this? Where did you learn to be an artist? And he went, oh, in prison. And he went, the thing is, they said I hit him with an axe and I didn't, but my father, and he was telling me this story about how he axed his father-in-law, and he's like, my ass is in the air and I'm getting a tattoo, and it was
and he's sticking needles in you while he's telling you the story.
It was so sweet. And afterwards he went, do you want to go for a coffee? So at that time an axe murderer gave me a tattoo. Yeah, that's a good story. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And then I got another one on my ribs, and there was just some swallows, and I was going to do this really lovely pencil thin, and I got 2 of these teeny tiny swallows done, and I puked up and went, I can't do this, it hurts too much. And I didn't, so I've got a half finished one as well.
Oh, that's funny. To be continued, maybe.
To be continued, yeah.
Okay, tell people how they can connect with you. And one thing I didn't get a chance to ask about was Naya Health. So tell people where they can connect and how they can learn more, especially through Naya Health.
Everything I have starts at my website, amandathebe.com, and all avenues lead from there. I really post mainly on social media, on Instagram. I have one reel that's gone viral at the moment. It's got 2.5 million views, and it's about me having saggy tits. So there you go. So I put out all of this really awesome content, and the crappiest reel I've ever done has gone mental. So Instagram's where you're going to find me. I'm the co-founder and chief of wellness and branding for Naya Health. Naya Health is a virtual end-to-end platform, and it's going to be launched in Canada. And the thing about it is that it isn't just looking at getting women hormone therapy. It's a full suite solution. And so it has the strength training, it has the mobility, the Pilates, the nutrition, the mindfulness, everything's in there. It will only be available in Canada for the assessment part to see a medical professional, but the rest of it will be available globally because anyone can exercise anywhere, right? So that launches in October. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, congratulations on that. I have to imagine that is a big project and big undertaking.
Of work, but it's worth it because I knew from my experience in the medical wilderness and then what currently happens now in Canada, there's a 2-year wait to see somebody, and it's wrong. So we're trying to sort of right that wrong, but also then say to them, and you should be looking at this, and here's how, right. That's what we need to do. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Good for that. Okay, last question. What is one simple thing that you would like our community to remember about our conversation? It can be big, it can be small, but just one simple thing to take away.
That knowledge is power. So there's a lot of information out there, and the more you have and you arm yourself, it's the best way to have agency. And one of the problems that happens is women feel so terrible and try to get medical help, and they have that floundering conversation. So be knowledgeable, get prepared, and sort of arm yourself with that information and the guidance from the medical community. Print them off. I take binders in when I go to the doctor. Literally say, this is what it is, and this is what I want, and this is why.
Yeah, that's a great pro tip. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a great day.